Hi, I'm CJ and this is my RC channel. This is the first video of the Chrysalis-Lite F3-RES build, and one of the first steps is to set up the tail boom. It has to be cut down to size, so I have put some blue masking tape, just one thin layer, and marked it to size using the plans. That's what the instructions tell you to do. This is a tapered tail boom. As you can see, this is smaller than this end, and you are supposed to cut from the thinner end. And so I have just marked this with the plans, and I'm going to go out back and use this Dremel and cutting wheel, and I'm going to cut this. Now, in case you do not know, carbon fiber and the dust from it, the carbon fiber itself is not a hazard to you in this state, but it's dust, the loose fibers, if you when you cut it, grind it, sand it, can be very harmful to you. So you do not want to breathe that. You don't want to get it into your skin. So you should wear gloves, eye protection, and a mask when you cut. And best advised to do it out of doors, not in your shop or house, where that particulate could come back around and you could breathe it in, or pets could get to it or whatever. So that's what I'm going to be doing in this first step outside, and when I return, I will be covering the process of mounting these little push rods they have to be attached inside the tail boom. So the first thing to do is going to be to clean them up with some denatured alcohol, wipe them dry. I may hit them with a little bit of fine grit sandpaper just to get a better gluing surface. In the instructions, they suggest using a piece of triangle stock, which is not in this little bundle here, and gluing the two rods on either side of the triangle stock. So if the triangle stock is like so, you're going to be putting a rod here and here, gluing them to that surface. There's been a lot of discussion online about how best to do this. This is a competition glider. It can certainly be flown for sport and just pleasure flying, but it is designed to be competitive in the rudder elevator spoiler class, Europe and AMA here in the United States. So every bit of weight that you can take off this kit, or not add to it unnecessarily with excessive glue and things of that nature, is a positive. And when you are adding weight to the tail boom, that is the most critical area to not be putting more than you need to. It varies on plane to plane. With this plane, it's about a 3-to-1 ratio. In other words, if you add 1 gram to the rear end of the tail boom, be it on the gluing the control rods with too much epoxy or something like that, or adding too much glue weight to the tail section, you're going to have to add 3 grams in the nose to counteract that when you are balancing the plane on its center of gravity. So I'm going to be using a method for gluing these push rods in that has been suggested by a couple of different people online. And what I'll be doing is I'll be putting a piece of music wire inside each of these tubes, just as a temporary thing to keep them stiff and straight. And then using that metal, I'll be taking some magnets and putting them on the outside, and that will pull the wire and thus the push rod housing against the carbon fiber. And then I can trickle thin CA in from either end along the push rod, gluing the push rod to the inside of the carbon fiber tube. At least that's the plan. I will be documenting that on video as best I can, and as much of it as I can, but I wanted to just kind of go over that process. These are the first steps in the instruction is getting this ready. So this should be a very interesting build. This looks to be it's definitely not a beginner's build. It's a intermediate to higher end build as far as its difficulty. It's a 3-piece wing. There's a center section and 2 outer sections, and there's 4 points of dihedral, so there's lots of areas, you know, where you could make mistakes that would adversely affect the airplane. So I'm going to try to go over as much as I can during this build and pass on any build techniques that I can, and as much specific information about this kit and the RES kits in general. In case you are not aware, F3-RES class planes are limited to how much carbon fiber they have. That's why they are all built up wing, standard covering, just little bits of carbon fiber here and there, such as a tail boom, and a little bit of carbon fiber in the wing structure for reinforcing things like main spars and such. But it can only be used minimally. There are no full carbon fiber wings, and that's one of the nice things about this class of glider. They're 2 meters. They don't require a super expensive radio. They don't require a tremendous amount of setup knowledge beyond basic radio configuration, setting up a V-tail, things of that nature. There are no ailerons or spoilers, so you're not dealing with reflex and you know, flap settings and things of that nature. Numerous flight modes. You know, you might have a couple flight modes, but you're not going to have you know, mainly just takeoff and then normal soaring. Because of those reasons, these kits are relatively inexpensive. Pretty much every F3-RES kit I have seen is $200 or less, $180, $170, maybe $209. I think was the most expensive one I'd seen, because it's all balsa plywood, and it, you know, that's it. It's all about engineering, and they're made to be, it's an entry-level class, but it's a very popular class. It doesn't mean that it's just, you know, strictly for beginners, because the planes are very advanced in their design, and a good experienced builder can make the plane very light and have a very competitive airplane. People spend a lot of time making these as light as possible. So this is a way that you can get into glider competition without a multi-$1,000 budget. A $50 to $100 radio, a $200 kit, another $50 to $80 worth of miscellaneous building supplies and or tools if you don't have them, and about $50 in miscellaneous parts to build yourself a high start, and you've got a full setup. You're ready to go. Okay, I have cut the boom, and now I need to sand sections of this boom to make the surface, prepare it for glue. That's going to occur later on down the road, but you want to do the prep now. So what you do is you measure from the tail boom to the front, and just put a piece of tape where the leading edge of the rudderons, or rudders, or however you want to describe them, are the V-tail, because that's going to glue onto this rod. And then, see if I can get this in view. As you can see on the plans, there's a bulkhead here, which you can also see in the side view here. There's another bulkhead here, again in the side view, and the rear of the pod will also be contacting this boom. So I have marked off one band of tape here, and I'll rough up this edge, probably about a ½ inch, and then I'll be roughing up this section in between these two bands of tape, and I'll be roughing this section, which is forward or rearward of the final bulkhead. And then after that's done, I'm going to wipe this down with denatured alcohol to get rid of any carbon dust. You don't have to sand this a lot, just enough to get rid of the shine a bit and prep this surface for glue. So I'm going to go ahead and give you a nice close-up on this surface so you can see the shine, and then I will show you what it looks like after I sand. So this is what I used, just regular denatured alcohol. You can get this at most hardware stores. I actually ordered this on Amazon because I was placing a large order a little while ago. So this is how it looks after it's been sanded with 400 grit sandpaper. It's the grade they recommend for doing this. And likewise, here's this end after the sanding. Now at this point, the tape can be removed. It doesn't really serve any other purpose at this point. One thing I would recommend is that when you do this process, just like when you're cutting, you use proper safety precautions, and when you're cleaning this with the alcohol, use paper towels or something that you're going to throw away. Don't use a nice some kind of a towel that you're going to bring back into the house, because you're going to just be bringing carbon fiber, and alcohol will evaporate, and then you'll have a rag with carbon fiber on it, contaminating your environment. So just use paper towels and throw them away immediately. Okay, I'm getting ready to start gluing these together and then into the tail boom. What I've done is, inside each of these tubes is a thin piece of metal wire, music wire, and those are not permanent. That's just to hold things in place. I'm going to demonstrate that. So I've got this in here, and as you can see, I can just move that wire around nice and easy. I got a bunch of magnets, and so if I take this magnet and put it outside there, you can see that it's holding the wire up against the side of the tube. So if it's hard to do this for you with the camera here. If I pull this down, you can see how it pulls the tube back up, and that's the music wire being attracted to the magnet. So these magnets, I'm going to be using them during the gluing process. Now, here's how I've decided to do this. At the tail end of the boom, these need to stick out a little bit. I'm going to let them stick out a little longer than necessary because there's extra, and I'll trim them down to size later. That doesn't mean I'm going to let them come out a whole bunch, maybe about a 1/4 inch. Now, one of the gentlemen who designed this, in some posts he made, he said that these need to be about 3/8 inch apart as they exit the tube, the boom at the bottom of the tail here, so that the clevises don't get caught up on each other, don't interfere with each other. What I want to do is, down the main part of the tube, I'm going to have these tubes glued together, and when they come out either end, I'm going to have something to keep them apart. So I've cut this small piece of balsa, and this is going to reduce the weight at the tail end considerably well, not considerably. I'm getting rid of that triangular piece of balsa that would go all the way down. I'll have this in place to keep these spread apart. I'm actually going to trim this down a teeny bit, and then I will glue these together all the way down so they're side by side, and that way they can't twist. And then I'll insert this into the boom, and I'll place magnets along the boom. I'll tape them in place so they stay in position, and that'll hold these paired tubes up against the carbon fiber wall, and then I can drip down from either end thin CA glue, and that will wick in between the plastic tubes and the wall of the boom and attach them, and that should be a good permanent setup there. So what I'm going to start by doing is line these up side by side so they are the same length, like that, and I'm going to tack it in place with some CA glue in a couple places, and then I'll put in the this piece of wood and glue that into place, and then I'll finish making sure that these two pieces are tacked together all the way down. Now, at least the length to about here. When they come out the other end of the boom, I'm not going to worry about trimming them or having them spread apart or attached to a piece of wood at this time. I will be putting a piece of wood in between them, but that isn't going to come into play until I have the fuselage built and I've decided how I'm going to mount the rudder and elevator servos. For example, if I have one facing left and one facing right, I'll have these tubes spread further apart and possibly anchor them along the sides of the fuselage. I may have both servos facing in the same direction, in which case I'll probably have these attached to a strip of balsa that will keep them equidistant apart as they travel into the forward section underneath the wing. So all that can be determined later. Right now I need to get everything glued into the boom. So I'm gonna just take still photos from here. It's going to be impossible to manage all this as they flop around. I'm going to need to pin them down and things like that. Just to give you a little builder's tip, you can use wax paper to lay down on top of your surface. I have found over the years one of the best things to lay down underneath wings, underneath anything that you're going to be using CA on that you want to be able to take it off of later, something that it won't stick to, is the back side of iron-on coverings, monocoat, solar coat. The plastic that goes on the back is pretty impervious to CA glue, and so I've used it for years. Anytime I cut sections of solar coat, especially large sections, I try to save that plastic, fold it up, and stick it aside in a bag. It works very nicely, and you'll have to give it a try yourself.